Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by on a typical UK miserable, lousy day. Still, at least it's not cold. You have to find something to look on the bright side. But when it's cold, you can wrap up. When it's just dank and miserable like this, I don't know, it depresses one's spirits. And then we have to take a deep breath and carry on anyway. That's life. Can't control the weather. Before I get going on filming a few orchids today, obviously in the top of the shot you can see one that's burst into life, and there's a few others lurking around that I'll get to, but my early morning start does involve watching other people's videos, and there's a couple of community projects starting up. Now these sound like fun. I'm always up for community projects where we can all join in with a common goal. The first one I want to mention is William Green on the My Green Pets channel has got an idea. It's not formally formalised, but the idea sounds absolutely brilliant. And a lot of us do videos at shows, yeah, and we see these wonderful displays of you know, sort of masses of orchids all squashed up together, normally with some sort of backdrop, and often add some music in and things like that. Well, his idea is that we do our own, yeah. So at some point down the line, if you remember the project last year, which was my orchid collection in 60 seconds, and a lot of people joined in with that, and it was good because some people made their very first orchid video to join in with that project, and that's got to be a good thing. It gets a few new people in the circuit. I like all that. That orchid project had a given date, yeah, where everybody uploaded their videos on the same date. So there was like a mass upload of my orchid collection in 60 seconds, and it was good fun. Now some posted theirs a bit early, some posted a bit late, some joined in a bit later on. You know, we can't always do things to a given date, but this project sounds like a good idea. The idea is you set up a display of your own orchids as though you were putting on at a show. And more details will follow, I'm sure. So keep your eye on the My Green Pets channel. Have a look at the video that's there now, putting the idea forward. I'm up for it. I'm game. And then there's another one on Zane's channel, where again it's a show-based theme. We all, you know, well, a few of us, a lot of us, some of us go off to shows and do a video. And what Zane's idea is that he's got a list of things like a scavenger hunt, yeah, whereby you scour the show for items that match the list of requirements. I mean, I can't remember them all, but I've got a show this Saturday. I'm going to have a go and see if I can actually fulfill the scavenger hunt, if you see what I mean. So have a look at Zane's video and his idea. So a couple of community projects coming up. I'm all for them. They're good stuff. Gives everybody a goal to aim at, if you see what I mean. It's difficult sometimes, you know, running an orchid channel as to how to do it. You know, some people post quite a long video now and again. Some people post lots of tiny little short ones, and very frequently. Some do a bit of both. You know, we've all got our own ideas, but we end up with repetition whether we like it or not. There are only so many basic formats for orchid videos. You know, we can do the new orchid haul, unboxing stuff. Yeah, that's always good. Everybody likes to see what somebody's bought or brought back from a show or bought online, that sort of stuff. Then there's the orchids in bloom. We all like to see pretty blooms. And then we've got the repotting and mounting type ones. And then we've got the culture ones. And that's about it, really. Everything else is just a variation on one or more of those themes. There's only so much we can do. And it can become tiring I won't say tedious. I mean, I enjoy my channel and working with it. But one thing I will say is that without the comments, I would stand back and say, what's the point? So the comments are important, you know, for everybody, not just for me. I'm sure that's part of the reason why a lot of us do it. So, you know, even if you just put nice video or something like that, the comments are important. They give the channel person something to do, you know, rather than just make the video and post it and forget it. You know, that's the way the YouTube thing works. You know, that's what we do. But it can become repetitive, and that's why I always say, you know, put your suggestions up. You know, the sort of spotlight videos are useful, but then again, you're really appealing to those that have either got that plant themselves or are thinking of getting it. You know, otherwise you're sort of branching away from what somebody's you know, idea of a good video might be. But like I say, there's only so many things we can film and show. I am totally looking forward to getting out and not being just stuck in this grow room. Now, I'm not saying that as a downer, because it's not. I love being out here with my orchids, but I also love being outside looking for our wild orchids and our butterflies and stuff like that. And I am so looking forward to getting those field trips going again. But that's end of April really, before that sort of season comes into play, so there's nothing much going on till then. And during the time I will patiently wait. Right, I'll get on and film a few things. All I'm watering today is the mounts, and I've been over my resting dendrobiums and bringing them out of their resting period and stuff like that. So unless there's anything specific happening in that arena, because I will be getting them down and having a look today, then you know, again, I don't want to repeat myself. But I think it's been interesting for people to see, you know, taking these plants into the resting period, keeping my eye on them during that period, but not too frequently. You keep looking at them too frequently, you might start interfering with their rest, which doesn't do them a lot of good. But just keeping our eye on them, and then gradually, you know, you can see things coming out of their rest period and showing some progress. The next thing, hopefully, is going to be blooms, or like a massive set of new growths on a plant. That'll be good to see, you know, and the time of year that actually turns out to happen. I mean, one video today was a Dendrobium aggregatum starting its new growths. Yeah. Now I've got an aggregatum cross and a Jenkinsii, which is very, very similar, quite honestly. Same care, same sort of culture, same everything, just a different name. But they look very similar. And mine aren't starting any new growths yet, so I'm behind. But there again am I. I am in the UK with a much shorter days, so I have that effect on my plants, whether I like it or not. So I'm possibly going to be later, you know, at some of my dendrobiums coming out, you know, to somebody who might be in the Mediterranean region of the EU, or, you know, in the southern states in the US and things like that. You know, we come from different parts of the world. We got to put up with the different day lengths, the different winter conditions. You know, there's quite a few snow videos today where people are buried in the white stuff, and although I love to see it, it does mean it's still winter, not spring yet. But hopefully coming soon. Right, I'll get on and film a few things as I go round today, and yeah, we'll see how we go. But have a look into those community projects and see if you think it's something you might want to join in with. The more, the merrier. I mean, I'm up for as many of those things as people can think of. But yeah, we'll see how we go. Now, my Dendrobium Harveyanum is playing games at the moment. They're subjected a little bit to being remounted. The old moss broke down, and I had to, well, because of the way it was mounted, I had to sort of tear it off the mount and start again. Well, it did push up some new growths, and it's got another one coming, but it's having a little bit of a kiki flush at the moment. There's one there. Now that's got roots, but hasn't opened its leaves yet, so that'll have to stay there. What else have we got? there's a big kiki here that's actually got leaves and roots, so that could come off. There's another one on the other side taking off, and I've got a feeling there's more than that. Anyway, there's 2 or 3 kikis to come off at a later date and start a new pot full. But we do have a couple of little flower spikes. Now these are weak. What I do with spikes that have multiple blooms is I keep a record of the average number of blooms on that spike, so that I can tell whether this one is a good one or not, and this one is not a good one. The average, when this was blooming well, was 7 blooms per spike. Well, that little spike's only got 3. Well, 3's better than none, but that's not a good spike. There's another one somewhere. Oh yeah, around here. Yeah, there's another little spike there too. Now that's only got 2 buds on it. Yeah, so the current spikes are not that good. But then these are winter spikes. There is a difference. You know, hopefully once the longer days come and this starts getting watered a bit more frequently and all that sort of stuff, and a bit of feed into the plant, hopefully it'll bloom better. But at the moment it's doing quite a few kikis. So somewhere down the line there will be Dendrobium, I've forgotten what it's flipping called now. I've probably already said it, but I'll do a pop-up of the blooms. They are very attractive, and it's a well worth having Dendrobium. It's quite a simple one to grow. It's not a rester, so you know, it's one of those that you can keep ticking over in the winter and not have to muck about doing the rest and all that sort of stuff. Although it does like to be a bit drier in the winter, but that's only because it's just not growing. In the UK, in the winter, nothing much grows, so you've got to reduce stuff down and not keep them soggy. So that's that one. What else? This bulbophyllum over here, this is Sycamensi, one of, did I get this one from Archie or not? I've forgotten. But it's one of, it's in one of Oliver's homemade basket thingies, which seems to suit this plant. Now that's got something coming out in the middle of the plant, and it did that last year, and I thought, oh goody, a spike, and it turned out to be a new growth. So that may well be yet another new growth. We'll have to wait and see. But it's doing something, I suppose. My little Angus fastuosa, the buds are pushing on nicely now, and they're starting to show their spurs out the back of the buds. All the Angus have a spur, which is a nectar source. They're all pollinated by moths, basically, night scented, no real colour in them, just pale greens and whites and things, but the scent, the fragrance is quite powerful, but only produced at night to attract the moths in, and their reward for pollinating is down the end of that spur. So they're starting to swell though. So last year that was in bloom for the Wessex show, which last year was about the 2nd Saturday in March. So again, it's, you know, it's roughly on time. It's looking as though it may be in bloom around that time again. So and at the moment that is an annual bloomer. It just blooms once, and that's your lot, and then it pushes out new leaves and some new roots, and then it does it again. So regular but infrequent. And my Zygopetalum Louisendorf, the new growths on this are starting to push a lot faster now. I won't say you can actually see them growing, but they are putting on growth at quite a rate of knots. Now this was in bloom when I got it, so I don't know at what point the spikes should start on those new growths. But looking at other people's videos and just sort of, you know, looking around at what I can find out, a lot of the zygos, the spike comes out when before the growth actually matures and forms its proper pseudobulb. So an immature growth seems to produce the spike. So we'll have to wait and see, but if I can get a few spikes on that, that'll be the first time ever that I've produced my own zygo spike, because normally they die before they get a chance. But the 3 I've got now seem to be doing quite well. This is the one that's most likely to bloom in, well, sometime down the line, at whatever point the spikes come out as these growths progress. But they're getting to the point where they're going to start opening leaves soon. So, or that one is anyway, that one's hot on its tail. And we'll see how we go. I filmed the buds on this Cattleya only a few days ago, saying that they were about to pop. Well, they've just started to pop. They're obviously not fully open yet, but the beauty of this Cattleya really is it's not only a bad size, and once it opens fully it's quite a regular shape, but it's the colour on the lip. It's just absolutely stunning. It's the most vibrant of reddish purples with a lovely deep gold, that's just a no ID Cattleya. I've actually got two of them. The other one's got two buds pushing on as well, so that will follow on after this one. But it puts up a good show when it blooms, and what it needs to do now is get some new growth going, which probably will happen as soon as these blooms are over. But yeah, not fully open yet, but getting there. Lovely colours on that. I hope that camera's doing it justice. Now this Nobly Primadonna, Dendrobium Primadonna, is not going to be right this year. Last year this did a mass blooming, and yes, it's doing it again, but they're not all going to come out together. The buds that are on the older canes, in some cases virtually leafless, or in this case totally leafless, are far more advanced than the ones on last year's growths. So it's going to produce a succession this year, but these blooms are quite large, so although these buds might look quite large, they've got quite a bit of swelling to do before they actually open. But you can see the sheer volume of buds. It is going to be quite a show. Yeah, quite a show. And it's going to have blooms virtually over the entire plant. There's hardly any canes on this that haven't got buds, apart from a couple of the older ones which I left. And having just said that, this cane here is one of the oldest ones. I could have cut that off, but blow me, right down the base of that cane there's a couple of buds coming out. So don't be in too much of a rush to cut the old canes off of Noblies. If there's nodes that have not bloomed, then they still can, you know. But this one's going to have, I hate to think how many blooms, but there's going to be a set that come out first, here, here, here and here, followed by all of the lot on last year's growths, which are pushing away from the canes now, just starting to show their buds. But yeah, it's also pushing out roots, and the roots seem to be coming mainly from the base of last year's canes. So those are now what I would call a secondary root system, because they pushed out their roots as they grew. Well, now they're having another flush of new roots, which is good. So that one's coming on nicely, but it's probably two weeks away from blooming ish. And as I say, there'll be an initial flush. They last a reasonable time, so maybe the others will catch up before the first lot start to fade. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it's going to be a good show, that one. No formal rest really, just a reduction of water during the winter, just enough every now and again in the pot to keep it ticking over. I do stop feeding it in the winter because it's not doing much until the buds show. But you know, it's blatantly obvious to anybody that that plant is no longer resting. New roots are growing, and somewhere or other it's got to get the energy and the push, the oomph behind those buds so that they put on a good show. So, you know, that one's back into the watering and feeding program now. Lightly at the moment, but as soon as I see some new growth at the base, that'll come back into the full watering and feeding program. The big blue Vanders finally decided to leave us. You see there's a big brown one round there. One fell off yesterday, which I had to recover from the sea of green below it. But these are going now. Probably only a day or two, and then I can take that spike off. And then we won't have any Vanders probably until April, May time, when the day lengths are there and the temperatures are back. And then hopefully all three of the Vanders I've got should do something. But that one has basically been in bloom throughout the winter. You know, nice splash of colour during those dull days. Now this little Angus is in the Why Won't You Bloom set. I've only got 3 Angus now. The Fatuosa we've just seen, which has got buds. The other one bloomed well later in the year than this, but this one hasn't. This is Angus Mysticidii, and that's misty as in mystic, not Mr. and Mrs. So, but this is a non-bloomer. But looking at pictures on the internet, because I'm starting to get a bit curious about those that haven't bloomed, this is still relatively a young plant. Most of the others that I can see, relative to bloom size, because obviously trying to get scale when you're looking at pictures is, I don't mean bug scale, I mean, you know, big and little scale. I think this plant's still quite small. So maybe this year, maybe sometime this year it'll do its thing. I mean, it grows well, it's always pushing out new leaves and new plants out the side. So, you know, it's sort of bushing up, it's progressing, got a lovely root system, but yet to bloom. And now with this one, it's no good saying it needs more light, because the culture for this one, it does come from quite shady areas. Very rarely gets any extreme forms of light. I've got one that comes from highlight areas. It actually lives right on the edges of scrubland and woods and things in river valleys and stuff, where it often can get full sun for part of the day. But most of them are medium light level. So yeah, maybe with the day length this one will do something this year, but you're in the Why Won't You Bloom set with a question mark, because maybe I'm hoping for too much from this one. Maybe it's still a bit young. But we'll see how we go. It's growing well, that's the good thing. Now this little variegated Dendrobium, this is moniliform, does actually have a couple of buds up here that I thought was going to be a kiki, because this does some of each. Occasionally it'll do a kiki and sometimes it's buds. But this was failing miserably in a pot. It didn't like it at all. Never really found out why it wouldn't do well. But since I mounted it, it's done a couple of, I'll say nice new growths, but they're not. They're undersized. But it has grown a lot of roots through the winter. And hopefully with the longer days, this one's going to push on nicely this year. It's got enough roots to keep what it's got going, and then the new growths will push out many more new roots and you really take that plant off with any luck. But yeah, we do have a couple of buds on there. It's worth noting to check out certain Dendrobiums. There are some Dendrobiums that are naturally cooler growers. They come from quite high up. So they would never get high daytime temperatures to any great extent. And I think, it's only a personal opinion, that if those types of Dendrobiums are kept too warm, they do get more prone to kikis, because they're not in their comfort zone, if you see what I mean. But this one in particular can produce blooms at any time. It doesn't have a blooming season as such. It blooms when it blooming well feels like it. And although those don't look like big strong healthy buds, hopefully they will produce some flowers. Pretty little flowers on that. Don't last a huge amount of time, but a lovely pure white. And I think there's a bit of yellow in there somewhere, I can't remember. But I haven't seen blooms on this for a while because I nearly lost the plant. So obviously it was too weak to produce any buds. But hopefully this one's coming back this year and getting going again. It was a nice plant once. This is about half of the size it once was. So going backwards, that one. Right, now I'm not filming this one for the blooms or anything other than the fact. Look at that pot. If anybody has had that level of algae growing on the inside of their pots and without repotting managed to find a way of getting rid of it, let me know, will you? Because I'm getting quite a few this year, and I think it's literally, it's a temperature related thing. Last year during the winter I had my thermostat set at 15. Well, this winter, because the resting Dendrobiums are in here, I took that down to 13. And as a consequence, there's quite a few of my pots have got this muck. It's only around the outside, it's not sort of impregnated through the whole pot, because some of these I've recently repotted. And that algae, is like slime, and it's stuck to the outside of the pot only. There's not a sign of it once you get half a centimetre away from the outside of the pot. So any roots that are not down the outside of the pot are fine. Those that are down the outside of the pot are growing in it. I don't think it does the roots any harm, but it looks awful. I mean, a simple way is to use non-clear pots. Then you won't get any, because it needs the light. The other thing is to put your clear pot inside another pot. Well, that's fine, except for a hell of a lot of my pots are air cone pots, and if you stick them inside another pot, you just as well not use an air cone pot, because you've lost that air circulation around the base of the plant. Getting rid of its drip tray helps, because it means it dries faster. See, I mean, that's an air cone pot, and you stand that on a tray, and although it's got little recesses round the side to allow some air in, it's not the same as being totally open, you know, standing on there with nothing underneath it, as opposed to standing on that tray. But this winter I got a lot of pots that look like that. It's unsightly, I don't like it, and if you've come across a product that I can pour around the edge of the pots, kill the flipping stuff without damaging my roots, then let me know. And don't forget, I'm in the UK, so it's no good saying things like Fisan 20, because you can't get that over here. But if somebody's tried something and it works without damaging the orchid in any way, let me know. I'd love to get rid of that. It's just unsightly. And in theory, if it's killed, it's going to turn brown. And then it hopefully will wash out with successive waterings. Otherwise, it's a repot job. You know, and I mean, some of the pots have got that, and they were repotted towards the end of the growing season. So they haven't been in their pot 6 months yet. You know, so there's nothing wrong with the media, but it's an unsightly thing that I would rather not have. Now my Brassavola Nodosa, the blooms are opening. Yeah, they're not fully open yet. Once they fully open, you get a lovely heart-shaped white lip with a green centre, so they're only just starting to open. There's 4 blooms on that spike, and that spike did have 4, but it's down to 2. 2 of them blasted. So yes, it's blooming, yes, the blooms are open, but I'm very worried about the plant itself. The plant is stalling. Now this one went downhill when I dropped it last year. Basically, I had 2 really vigorous, strong new growths pushing out not long after it bloomed, and I dropped it on its face basically and broke them off. So during that growing season it had to like start again. Well, it did push up 2 new growths, and they have bloomed, but not very well. Well, these blooms don't seem to want to open clean. So I'm worried about the plant itself. Most of the others that I've seen growing really well and vigorously are in pots. So when a plant's not doing that well the way you've grown it, and you can see that others are growing it a different way and it seems to be working, well then why not try it? So literally as soon as these blooms are off and I can see some signs of some new growths on this, I'm going to change this one. I'll probably put it in a clay pot, holy pot, one of my new ones, with the larger bark, but it will keep the roots hydrated that little bit longer, because I mean this is literally bare rooted on a mount. There's no moss or anything, and a lot of the older roots are still hydrating but not doing very well. But the worry is that the newer roots are failing, and we all know what that's a sign of, don't we? So I'm worried about the plant. This one went back into the fungicide treatment program for obvious reasons. I was getting worried about the content of the plant, shall we say. Now it's had those treatments, but it's the sort of plant where you can't really get much of any sort of chemical into the leaves. They're so thick and leathery and fleshy, they're deliberately designed to just not absorb anything and put up with some pretty high intense light at times. That's how those leaves work. They're not designed to absorb moisture. That's supposed to be done through the root system. Now it's got enough roots to keep the plant going, but the new roots that formed didn't progress. They stalled. That's always a sign of the plant going downhill. So we'll try putting that in a pot once the blooms are over. Not fully opened yet, but soon. We'll see how that one goes. Okay, as far as my resting dendrobiums are concerned, they're not. You know, we're nearly up to the end of the third week in February. Days are getting longer. It's time. And the signs are there. I mean, this is my anosmum that I got early last year. The buds have formed on the cane. Well, that's now not going to change. There's no point in keeping it dormant to get buds because I've already got them. Yeah, it's already done that. Yeah. This cane I don't think is going to bloom. It might have a flush later in the season, but it stalled. You know, it started growing too late in the season to mature at the full length, and it's not going to grow anymore. That's a terminal leaf. But we have signs of life at the base of the plant. That's the important thing. Yeah, it's coming back to growth. And if I keep this stalled any longer, I could jeopardise the season for the new growth. So that's now coming out of dormancy. It had a reasonable water today. Now I won't up the frequency of the watering too dramatically at first, because basically there's not much going on with this plant. It'll take a while for that to dry off again. So at the moment most of my mounts are every other day. We're getting to the point where some of them are going to have to be every day soon. A lot of the bare-rooted ones, things like my Tolumnias, are drying off in the day, which means they spend the second day dry, which is not a good idea when most of those are coming into active growth again. This other one, this is an anosmum cross, this is Nesta. I've got two new growths at the base there, at the base of this cane and at the base of that cane. It's coming back into growth, and the same applies to this one. The buds are already formed. On the 3 growths I grew last year, the buds are already there. So the rest has done its job. There is no point in resting it any longer. So again, start reintroducing water, and as soon as I see these growths starting to push, I can start getting some feed in there too. So yeah, the only two that are still a bit iffy are the Jenkinsii and the Jenkinsii aggregatum cross. There's no signs of new growths on those yet, but it's time to start thinking about encouraging them to produce those new growths. They're quite desiccated, so they had a water today. They'll miss the next time I do a run, and then they'll get watered again, and hopefully their dormancy will end naturally just by getting what is the equivalent of the you know, late winter early spring rains starting. So that's the idea with those. So yeah, I think the rest is coming to an end, if not actually ended, for most of the ones I've got. So they're back into a watering program, slowly but surely building it up, and introduce the feed once the new growth start pushing on. So we're there at long last. Now we wait for the blooms. The buds are there. Now it's just a matter of waiting. The anosmum, I don't know, because that's never bloomed for me. It was a new plant. The Nesta on the 2 previous years has bloomed in April. So we've got a little bit of a wait yet, but around the April time. I think it was sort of second week in April last year. So we'll see how we go, but the buds are there. The rest has done its job. Well, the other thing I meant to say while the plants were down, and as usual I forgot, is that once your dendrobiums have had their very high light, their dry period, and their cooler temperatures, and their resting period is effectively over, they no longer need that very high light. They don't need it anymore. It's done its job. The buds have already formed. So if you can think about plants and light levels, I've still got some dendrobiums that bloom a bit later in the year that still have no buds. Well, I can start shuffling things round to make sure they get the best light possible. Whereas those that have already formed their buds and coming back into growth, they don't need the high light during the growing season. Yeah? So you can think about the position that you've got them kept in. Once they start back into growth, perhaps something that needs a bit more light can take priority. You know, have a little shuffle round. And I'll end this video on what for me is a high spot. Donald is back. Now, I had to have this explained. This was nicknamed Donald by a couple of viewers, and I had to ask, I'm afraid. But it's basically geared up to the cartoon eyes and the yellow beak. But I had to ask. So if you don't see it, fair enough. But as Miltoniopsis blooms go, this is not a colourful one, but it is the purest of whites with a lovely pattern. It makes up for it on size. The blooms are massive. They really are. For Miltoniopsis blooms, that's quite a big one. Now, the other bud on that spike I don't think is going to develop. This is a winter spike, yeah? So it's never going to be a good spike in the winter. They're going to always be better with the longer days. Unfortunately for me, with those longer days comes heat. And the plant doesn't like the heat. So the best spike ever for me on a Miltoniopsis is going to start growing towards the end of the summer, mature in the autumn and bloom in early winter. that would be its best chance of producing a really good spike. But yeah, nice to have that one back again. Lovely bloom. Slightly fragrant. But because these don't like high light, I'd be reluctant to put it in the sun to see how strong the fragrance will get. These are very sensitive to anything they don't like, they'll object. They're good at doing that. They'll object to anything that's not quite right. But lovely bloom. Glad to have that one back. Okay, see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.